Hey friends, this is Wendy. I'm so excited to be here with you today. We are going to be using the Western Wear Lovely Layers, and we're also going to be using the Mini Desert Blooms Lovely Layers. I've pre-cut all of my dies in white, Nina White cardstock, and I'm going to just be coloring them with Copic markers. I'm using E79, 77, and 74. And I really wanted to lean into making these boots look kind of dark leather or suede. So to tell you a little bit about myself so that you know where I'm going with this design, I grew up wearing cowgirl boots. I grew up on 40 acres most of my life and in a really small rural community surrounded with people who did ranching and had horses, and we had horses growing up along with other farm life. And for me, making boots in a more realistic way of how they would be seen or worn just works better for me. I feel like making them really fancy or like different colors just doesn't really resonate with me, because as growing up as a kid, we never would have worn boots like that. It just wasn't what you would consider realistic. I guess we always bought boots that were functional, not necessarily fancy. And we actually would have probably as a kid, we probably would have referred to somebody that wore really fancy boots as what we called a drugstore cowboy. I don't even know what that means really, except that maybe somebody who just is playing dress up but isn't the real deal. So I went to put all of this stuff on here and I was just like, this just doesn't feel right. Like, I colored the boots in a very leather way so that they would just look like old worn leather boots. And then I thought, okay, if I were to have actual spurs on my boots, they would just be really plain leather spurs and probably a metal stock like this, black metal. So that's what I did. I kept them really simple and more in line with realism as far as what we wore growing up. And for the little spurs, we probably wouldn't have wore spurs that were like super spiky. They would have been more like a blunt spur, but I colored these just with a cool gray and then added the little black dot, and they worked out perfect. So this card is being created for, the person already has the card, was being created for a friend of mine who is actually one of the board of directors of our little county fair. Our little county fair actually starts today. And so that's why I created this card, was because it just really made me feel like something she would enjoy. And I do so much better when I create cards with purpose versus just here's a cute card. I'm more creative. I don't know about you guys, but my creativity flows much better when I'm creating with a purpose. And I feel like the results are more in line with what I would want. So here's those mini desert blooms, and you can see down there in the bottom right corner of this lovely layer guide how all the blooms come out of the top of the boot. So we're going to kind of go with that method, but we're going to keep it, we're going to do a fun fold card, and we're going to kind of keep the florals out of the boots, but then we're also going to use them on the sides of the boots. So you'll see as this comes together. So using the lovely layer guides from Honeybee Stamps is really the best way to get all of your parts and pieces lined up correctly and layered correctly. I love coloring little dies like this and creating something beautiful, and I really love fun fold cards. So we're going to make a fun fold card. I've been leaning into my fun fold cards again lately, and I just love it. If you want to create this fun fold, I'm going to give you the directions in the description of this video. So all you have to do is click on the More in the description, and it'll do a little drop down, and then I'll have the instructions right in there, and you can copy and paste them into another document and print it, or just screenshot it on your phone or your device, and then you'll have the instructions. So after I got all of these pieces colored and layered, I went with like pinks and greens because I felt like that would complement the brown boots really well. And then Honeybee offers a freebie with their $100 orders or more. And so I actually went ahead and used the freebie paper in the background of this, which kind of has a turquoise and brown feel. And then Honeybee also sells the Spellbinders cardstock pack, and so I used some dark brown cardstock for my base for this card. So now that I've got all this stuff colored and then I'm getting it all colored, we're going to go on to actually creating the card itself. I didn't feel like it was necessary to show you all of the coloring just because truthfully I'm not a colorist. I'm pretty novice at my coloring, and so I never feel super confident in sharing my tips and tricks with coloring. If you're looking for true tips and tricks for coloring and somebody to really teach you coloring, I would recommend, of course, watching Kelly Taylor's videos, who is one of the design team members here, and she does the YouTube lives here on Honeybee's channel. And so definitely watch her videos for actual real advice in coloring. My abilities in coloring have pretty much just come from her because I watched her videos and a few other people's to learn how to color with Copic markers. So the more you do it, the better you get, and she's a great resource for that. Okay, to make this card base, you're going to need a 5.5 by 8.5 piece of cardstock, and we have a bunch of other pieces cut, and I'll tell you the measurements on those as we go. You're going to put your 5.5 inch side up at the top of your trimmer, and you're going to line it up with the 1.25 inch mark on the top of the trimmer. Then you're going to bring your blade down and you're going to line it up at the 1 inch mark, and you're going to cut to the 5.25 mark. You're going to move your cardstock over and do exactly the same thing. So you're going to move your cardstock to 4.25, and you're going to cut from 1 to 5.25. So I have 2 slits going down my cardstock right now. There's one on each side. They're both about, they're both an 1.25 inches away from the edges. Now we're going to put the piece of cardstock, we're going to turn it, and we're going to put this in here so that the end that has the cuts closest is going to be at the bottom. So see there how the cuts come all the way down to the end here? And if you look at the other side, there's a bigger gap between the end of the cardstock and the cuts. You want the short end of the cuts there. You're going to score at 1 inch on each side of the cut line. So on the outer edges of those cut lines, not all the way across. Then you're going to score at 2 inches on either side of those lines, same as you did with the 1 inch, but you're just going to go to 2 inches and score. And then you're going to score at 4.25, but only in the center, in between the, see that how here we got 1 inch, 2 inch, and then we've got the 4.25. That 4.25 is only scored at the center. Then you're going to score at 5.25 only on the sides. Okay, so we've got 3, see here where it's open, you can tell. We've got 3 score lines on the sides of the cut line, 1 score line in the middle of the cut line. It's really important how you do that. So if you need to pause, rewind, or whatever, go ahead and do that so that you can make sure you get your scores and cuts correct. I recommend doing this first on a junk piece of paper, piece of cardstock, so that you can get your cuts and scores down really good before you make a commitment with expensive cardstock. Now let me tell you the pieces we're layering on, what they're measured at. So we have a 2 3/4 by 4 inch piece of basic white, Nina Solar White cardstock, and that will go inside the card. Then we have a piece of 2 3/4 by 3 inch, which is going to be a pattern piece of paper that you saw me put on the front. We're going to do some stamping while I'm telling you this. We're going to use a 3¼ inch by 5¼ inch piece of pattern paper. You saw me put that on the front at the bottom. And then we need 2 pieces that are 1 inch by 3 inch to go on each side. And you saw how I layered those down. If you need to look at it again, just rewind and pause the video so that you can see where I did it. Now I'm going to stamp a sentiment, and this is the piece that is cut at 2 3/4 by 4 inches that's going to go inside the card. So you just have a smaller space to write your little message, but it's a fun way to create a card. The cool thing about these cards is they stand up really nice, and then they have a lot of layer and dimension to them. It's just a really fun way to add a little bit of extra interest to your handmade cards. And I really think that your recipient will love it. I have found that people tend to really love fun fold cards because they're unique and they're fun, and it's just something different. Okay, now for the placement. This took me a while. I played around a lot with where everything was going to go, and I'm not going to make you sit here and watch the whole process, but let me tell you, it was about 30 minutes worth of placement and moving things and deciding how I wanted to lay everything out. Once I got everything laid in place the way I wanted it, I grabbed a piece of press and seal and I just pushed it right over the top of everything. And then I went ahead and on the left side there, I pushed it down onto my work surface, and this creates kind of like a hinge so I can lift and put this back down multiple times as I glue everything in place. Then I also needed to tape my card base down so that my card base wouldn't move around and get squiggly on me, because if it did that, then I might lose the placement that I was going for. So I went ahead and lifted all of these up together, and now you can see they're all on the press and seal there. And when I lay them back down, they're in the right perfect spot. So all I have to do now is add glue to the bits that are going to go down on the card base first. So for example, this little cactus piece here is going to get glued down first because it's at the back. And so I'm just adding glue to each of these elements that are going to stay put. And then we're going to fold this back over. We're going to push everything down so that it's kind of like, stuck on there, suction down, stuck on there. And I'll hold it for just a few seconds. And then I'll go ahead and pull the press and seal back up and very gently bring with me anything that's left to be glued. So we continue to repeat this process until everything is glued in place. We don't want anything to not be glued in place. So see that? So these will stay exactly where they're supposed to be. And now I can focus on gluing the next elements down. It does get a little tricky when you layer things so that things are offset. So like this cactus, for example, is in front of the boot, behind the boot, but in front of the hat. So that can make things a little bit complicated when you're doing this type of layering. And then I realized, oops, I didn't want this to stick to my extra layers there on my card base. So we're just going to get everything tucked down, glued in place where we want it. And then when I go to lift this up, do you see there where the hat is kind of stuck on that cactus? That's because that cactus is in front of the hat. So this definitely presents a little bit of a challenge. So I'm just going to go and kind of hold it up, being gentle as possible because I don't want to bend or wreck my little cactus piece. I'm going to add some glue to the boots, and then I'll lay everything back down and glue it in place. And then the only thing really left is that one little flower there that kind of just got lost in the shuffle. And you can see the stem of the flower actually came in front of one of the boots. That's a super easy fix. I can just lift this boot up, scooch it up, scooch that flower up, and then press and glue everything down. Now to make sure all of this stayed in place where it was supposed to, I went ahead and set something heavy on top of it after I got done with the video because I really wanted everything to be adhered very well, and I didn't want to risk anything popping up off of here that shouldn't be. There's nothing worse than giving somebody a card and then it falls apart on them. So I really didn't want that to happen. Once I have everything kind of glued in place, I then can remove my tape on the sides. And I decided that I needed a little something behind the boot there. I felt like it looked out of balance to me. So this was the perfect added element. Look at that. It just kind of brings everything into balance, makes everything feel a little bit more filled out and complete. And then I was able to just glue these parts and pieces into place, and they were ready to go. And then that is the whole card. I mean, there was really nothing left after I did this. I felt really good about it, and I really didn't want a sentiment on the front of the card because I felt like it would just detract from the imagery. So I left the front of the card alone and didn't add anything. I did, however, add my little sentiments on the inside, or my one sentiment on the inside, and I made sure to get these glued down and in their proper placement. It's pretty rare that I give a card where I've spent so much time and energy. This video was definitely cut down quite a bit. This card took me a couple of hours to make, but my friend who received this card is really special to me, and I knew that she, would matter to her as far as like the time spent doing something fun. So, or doing something creative, I guess I should say. I ended up deciding not to add these little guys, but I was just kind of stuffing them in random places because I was thinking like, do I need these? Should I add these somewhere? I just liked them. I thought they were cute. And so I was trying to figure out if they made sense on the card, but I'll just save them for a future card. So that's it. This is the entire card. I love how it turned out. Look how cool it is when it opens. It opens really fun. And then it stands up beautifully. So you can set it up, and then it's got this fun dimension, and it's just something unique and fun. This is called a center step fun fold card. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.